Welcome to Association Rockstars, where we hear about the journey and insights of amazing association executives and partners who are building and changing the industry of tomorrow. My name is Lowell Aplebaum. I'm the CEO of Vista Cova, where we partner with organizations on strategy, governance, and facilitation. It is my pleasure, my honor, really my joy to have with me today Kate Fryer. She's the CEO of the Endocrine Society. In this role, she partners with the board of directors and other member leaders to develop strategies to achieve the organization's mission and works with staff team members to ensure all strategies and programs are successfully implemented. I also have the pleasure of knowing Kate. I think it's for over a decade at this point.
More than that.
Back back from Society for Neuroscience days. Kate was with American Chemical Society. Kate has her CAE. She is just a leader and brilliant colleague in the space, and we are so excited to have you with us today.
Thank you.
So always in these conversations, the place that we start, I know we share that we both have kiddos, and often Marvel, DC, and other good superhero places come up. We're always trying to stoke and grow the skill sets that shine in those that we raise, but we also have them in each other. And so I would love to know in your own journey, what have you discovered as what is one of your superpowers, right? One of those skills that you've seen within yourself that has really been part of the success of your professional journey.
Not surprisingly, the topic of the conversation here, but it really has been around helping bridge between boards and staff and getting to a yes, helping boards think. I say boards, but really member leaders in general think transformatively, getting those transformative changes across the finish line, which has been a hard one skill, but one I feel really proud of.
Do you feel like as you look at, we'll get into the discussion about that in a moment, but as you look at your professional journey, do you feel like there were innate skills you grew up with that allowed you to have that strength of understanding and be able to listen and get them to yes? Is it something you learned along the way? Is it mentors? Like, how did you learn it?
Yeah. So I have that wisely as a slide at the end about how I got those skills. But yeah, it was very intentional. It wasn't innate at all. These were things I worked hard to learn.
All right. Well, then we want to learn about them. So let's get into the learning first about how to navigate boards and build trust and drive change. And I'll reserve my many questions for the other side of it then.
Happy to do so. Happy to do so. All right. I'll start here by getting the deck shared. Is that working correctly?
We are seeing the deck, but it's in presenter mode.
All right. We need to change swap. It's not letting me swap it. Hold on. I'm going to try again.
No problem.
It's funny because we literally just did this.
We did try it before. So the technology we know works. There we go. Perfect.
Thank you. So I guess I want to start by giving just the caveat here. I am in no means an expert in negotiation techniques, or I'm not a researcher in sociology. This is my experience. This is coming from what I've done, what works for me, and as who I am, and maybe there's I hope maybe some principles here that others can apply. But just with that starting caveat. And I like to start with this question around, what could you accomplish if you weren't afraid of getting a no? I think that as association professionals, this is a thing that we often can point out in others around us, saying, oh, it's just how we've always done it, or those are folks who do what they've always done. I'm not sure we're always as good at asking ourselves and understanding where we can fall into these same traps ourselves of not really questioning and challenging ourselves to really put things forward. I think that fear of being rejected by a board, by member leaders, can really hold us back. And if I was going to ask one thing of the field that we all are in, it is to encourage us to be a little braver about putting questions forward, big questions, blue sky thinking, to coin a term. And so what I want to do to sort of frame my or to anchor the thinking here is to give you an example of a reasonably transformative project that we've implemented here at the Endocrine Society, and then talk about how I got there. So what it is, and then how I got there, and then how did I learn it. And so what it is the name of the program is little unfortunate in hindsight. The Innovation Development Fund is the name, but what it was is a program around using our association's assets to make progress toward a goal of decoupling the society's future from our members' ability to pay. This was a program that we started down the road of a couple of years ago, but obviously in the environment we're in today becomes even more important to think about and accelerate. And the scope of this, so in a nutshell, it's a program that authorized the use of up to a third of the society's reserves to invest in higher risk, higher return opportunities to generate revenue. This really practically means investing into the for-profit sector, looking for ways to create revenue streams that aren't coming from our members. And within the governance space of this, the structure of an oversight of this becomes a sort of an advisory group, a steering group that isn't just members, but is also bringing in outside experts to do that first line of approvals and vetting. We have Finance and Audit Committee with a role, and the Board of Directors with a final okay. Each of those groups have very clear decision paths. What is it that they're making decisions about, so that it's not just the same decision getting made 3 times in a row, which I think we all know can get kind of common in associations where you sort of relitigate it again at the finance committee and then you relitigate it again at the board. So really trying to be intentional about not doing that. And then how does this program administered? We're doing it with a dedicated person who's focusing on that business development, the due diligence, negotiations, governance work. Where are we now? We have evaluated about 25 deals-ish. I've gotten 3 greenlit all the way up through the board to greenlit, and we've gotten 1 across the finish line. Obviously, at each stage along the way, some of these have fallen off in terms of making sense for investment from us. The time frame in which we went from concept to approval. And so again, I was talking about the scale of this. A third of the society's reserves potentially at risk here would normally, I would say, have suggested a very long timeline. And so it all actually started, the original concept started with my interview for the job as CEO. It was coming up in the context of my observations about the strengths and challenges facing the society, and the conversation with the selection committee around how might we not use our reserves as a trophy, but actually as a tool to help us achieve our goals. And so it started maybe the first nascent discussion there, and I started the job then in April. In May was my first board meeting where we had some discussions about my observations, and then what problem were we tackling? That was sort of that first formal conversation. By June,
I ask you a question about that piece of it?
Yes.
But what problem were we tackling? Was that a question you asked them and let them answer? Was that a question that you presented what you saw a problem? Like, how did you engage them in that question?
Both. I did both things. And you'll see in the next one where I talk about these, but yes, one is me saying, here's what I'm seeing, here's what I'm hearing, what do you think? And the other is then recapping that. Here's what I heard you say, is this correct? And that technique of has been one of those most powerful tools in the toolbox, honestly, as in getting to consensus, to alignment. If my experience is, so often this goes awry when you think you're solving the same problem, but you really are not. And getting super clear about that, right? What are we trying to achieve here? Our future decoupled from our members' ability to pay. Honestly, getting them to yes was pretty simple once we got to that clarity of a problem statement. I don't say simple. I mean, I feel like I'm selling myself a little short there, but it was a journey. So yeah, we were then here by June. It is that back and forth. Here's what I heard you say. Is that correct? And then a really good conversation around risk tolerance. Where was their risk profile here when we're talking about this? Which is a really good conversation to be having, I'll say as an aside right now, with member leaders, as we are all facing various kinds of risks to our businesses. By August, I was doing that recap and reaffirm again, and here's where we're headed. And then in November, I was putting forward, here's how we might go about it: draft governance, decisioning rubrics, stage gates, that sort of experience here. And then by February, depending on where you count the start, less than a year, roughly a year later, we got to yes. And so, I'm saying a third of the society's reserves for us, that practically, because we have very healthy reserves,
Yeah.
practically was roughly a year's operating budget. And so significant investment here from them. And so then this question of how did I get it? How did I get there? And please know, I'm putting this in the frame from an association leader. How did I get them there? But this really was and had to be all along a partnership, and back and forth with a lot of transparency and openness on both sides about the process. So the first one that I'd say is really understanding their concerns. And this is one of those things that, Lowell, to your point, that clarity of problem, we often think we understand their concerns. This is a nuanced and one of these ones that I had to learn, that it isn't always just the boardroom where you're gaining this understanding, or in the room with the member leaders. I had a mentor tell me, you growl at me a lot as an introvert. I'm pretty introverted. That it was important for me to show up at the bar after the board meeting with the member leaders. It was important for me to show up at the event that wasn't the formal meeting, because so much of understanding about what is really their concerns is happening outside of those formal discussions. Are they worried about their legacy? Are they worried about their own personal experience within the society? Are they worried about their trainees? What is it that they're worried about here? And
Yeah.
it's not always super obvious in my experience. The next one is hearing what they meant and not what they said. And those that have worked with me, this is not my term. This I learned from my mentor, but has served me very well. Often member leaders are giving direction that is solving a problem. It sounds like they're giving us directions because they heard a problem and now they're solutioning. And it can be very dangerous if we take that always at face value. There involves a lot of conversation, but often we need to help get to principles about what we're hearing rather than the specific solutions. So this one, hear what they meant, not what they said. I tried really hard to come up with an example here to sort of tell you what I meant by this. And I was struggling a little bit because the ones that I'm grappling with tend to be like super complicated with lots of fingers in it. But if they're telling you that you have to give away coupons at your booth because you don't have enough booth sales, right? There's
Right.
solutioning there. What you're hearing is, and then, so what I do then here is going recapping and reaffirming. Okay, so the next meeting, what I heard you say in the last meeting was that you were concerned about booth sales. You were really wanting to bring folks forward. Is that correct? That is what you were, right, right? Okay,
Mm.
brilliant. Well, because of that, here's our proposed solution, right?
I love you. You filtered out the tactic to speak
Yes,
to the need. That's wonderful.
that
Yeah.
that's exactly right. And this is like I said, I think one of those most powerful tools in the toolbox. And 2 and 3 go together, right? They're a matched pair. Um, I also use breadcrumbs. We live and breathe as association professionals. We can live and breathe this stuff, but our member leaders are getting it once a quarter, maybe once a month. But it's a moment for them, and creating what I term breadcrumbs, using the same graphics or the same terms or the same mechanism over and over in what we do helps create consistency. It reminds them, oh yeah, we've talked about this before. I'm comfortable with this. It helps create that anchor for them. Uh, I'm as guilty as anybody of like losing track that our new board members or whatever have not come up to speed, right? So this kind of just being embedded in how we think about it, I've found really valuable. I do think it's also important that we are incredibly realistic and transparent about the risks. I suspect all of us have seen these proposals for new programs and they're super rosy and it shows a net profit or a whatever. And that I have found can create a lot of distrust with member leaders
Mm.
because they inherently understand that there's risk here and we're not being clear and transparent about what it is. So being able to show, the best, worst, and most likely cases, here's the downside risk, here's the upside risk. And within that, the risk of inaction often is something we do not articulate well as, I think, association professionals, and something we can do a better job. So I think that is also really important. And that I alluded earlier to using stage gates and clear success criteria. In this case, the Innovation Development Fund example, the ability to say you're going to have an opportunity at each investment to sort of check in. Here's the stage gate. Here's the point, the go, no go. In 3 years, here's where we want to be to create success. If we're not, you'll have the opportunity to check in, then change direction, that sort of thing. Being clear about those upfront and along the way was really valuable, especially in a higher risk type of engagement like this one. Meant for my member leaders, there was a lot of comfort that just because they were saying yes now didn't mean it was a forever yes. There were opportunities along the way in a very structured way, not in a disruptive way, to engage. And so for me, all of these came down to sort of like really three things. It's around trust. That's bidirectional trust. I needed to, as the staff side, I needed to know the board was going to tell me that they were going to raise concerns. They were going to be upfront with me. They were not going to say one thing in the room and then leave the room and right, like badmouth it.
Right.
And the reverse was true. They needed to trust that I was going to be upfront, transparent about what was going on. So that trust building around alignment, as Lowell you asked about, right? Like that's so important. We're all on the same page about what problem and how are we approaching it, and then creating that clarity for everyone. So really, these boil down for me to those three things. And so then the question that you asked at the beginning, how did I learn this? And yeah,
Yeah.
this is not innate. I didn't have this. This wasn't something that I knew how to do. I started with a sense, I thought I knew exactly where I wanted to be in my as a early mid career person, where I wanted to go. That was interestingly, as a COO, I had no interest in being a CEO. question. um,
Yeah.
and what did and I started looking around for what skills don't I have in order to get to that place. And I quickly understood that that interface with member leaders, being able to do that successfully and effectively is sort of the absolute most critical skill to being an effective leader in a society. My experience has been exclusively in professional member societies, primarily in the sciences, the research and applied sciences. And so it was first that skills, and then it was about positioning myself for the right place in an organization. And so I started my career in the sort of publishing, science publishing vertical, and I maneuvered myself over into governance and strategy because I knew I needed these skills. I knew I could take my project management stuff, and that was super valuable, but I needed this other part. How does one manage it? And then I became an absolute pest in asking questions. Um, Pretty please tell me why you did this. How did you do this? What were you thinking? I don't understand. And I had a CEO who was super gracious with his time and let me ask all of these questions and challenge him. And so it was a very very intentional process to get good at this.
Yeah.
And yeah, I would say now this has been the skill that has served me best in the work that I do now with the Endocrine Society and with the societies before this. And so that is the story I wanted to tell today.
Well, we have to start with, I think, at least 6 questions that have come in. So, all right, take a sip because you got more talking to do. Uh, Now, first, we got a question from David Jackson, CEO of Asvet, about how did you assess the risk tolerance of your board, right? Is there a formal assessment? Was it more of a conversation, right? What is both the place of questioning and confirmation, but what's sort of the repeatable process of initial assessing and then ongoing assessment of it?
So it was sort of two parts. One was the very strategic use of an outside voice into the process, an outside advisor coming in, helping the board have confidence that I was not chicken little or I wasn't overplaying something, right? So there was this trusted outside voice who was partnering with me in this and talking about the kinds of risks. And then we had a very specific exercise that we went through in a board meeting where we broke out into small groups. They had conversation around this concept and then sort of created within their small groups a description of the risks that they were comfortable with and not comfortable. Where were their hard lines? And then we brought those groups together to then discuss it. And in the end, that led us to a very clear amount of money and a description of the risk profile, which in this case was actually a sort of in the investment world, you would call it like a medium to high risk stuff. So they understood the examples we were using, which is ironic given me that I am the least sporty person was all sports analogies around, we're going to swing at a lot of pitches and we knew that we were gonna whiff a bunch of them. And anyway, it was a good exercise, and there was a tremendous amount of clarity, interestingly, on the other side of it from the board, alignment, unanimity from them.
So we have a few questions, I think, surrounding that, and this is going to be probably the same question but asked about two different audiences. How do you prepare a board that continues to change because of the nature of our organization's governance? What did you have to do, if anything, to prepare them to be able to be in those small groups and talk about risk through a nonprofit association context? Right? They just showed up and they were ready to have that conversation. Did it take some tending, feeding beforehand? Was it just reading? Like, how do you prepare them to be ready to have that conversation?
Such a good question, Lowell, and probably the seventh item on that slide of what did I do is pick the right time. right? Like you do have to have the right time and people in the space for this. And so when this was all happening, this is practically 2021,
Right.
right? So we're in the midst of giant disruption, pivoting, changing. So there was a board that was already prepared. They had a new CEO coming in. They were sort of change prepped.
Yeah.
And so I did take advantage of the fact that I had a board that was already thinking and embracing change. I didn't have to do the work of getting them ready to go there. I
Yeah.
just then needed to make sure that I understood what level of change were they ready for, what level of risk were they ready for. And so, yeah, in this particular example, I didn't have to get them prepared for that. If I did, I would have approached it in that risk of inaction approach. If we don't change, here's what the outcomes are. And this is again where those outside voices bringing you, Vista, Cova, like who are helping them think a little differently. It isn't a distrust in me; it's more of a validation that they're needing. So,
That we have two more board questions and then at least one or two staff questions. So the other one's on the other side, right? The board you had in 2021 who described and confirmed and committed to this risk tolerance, I imagine is different to some extent in some slots than the board you have in 2025. A challenge organizations faces with the rotation of board members is the transference of not just like historical knowledge, but to no, we committed to things. Like you don't just get to swing the ship. This kind of commitment, how have you approached indoctrinating or inviting new board members to embrace this, right? Like this is something they're inheriting, like this risk tolerance. How do you bring new board members along to this?
So I'd say there are two primary ways that I do it. The first is very intentional onboarding processes within governance, but also with me, that I am taking the time to sit down with each of them and talk about, okay, here's the big stuff. Here's the things you probably aren't aware of as, they're more behind this kind of project, which is not really member facing, and spending the time there. And then the second is those breadcrumbs. When I then am reporting, so now it exists and I'm coming into board that's almost 100% different than it was the board that approved it, and I'm saying, hey, in 2021, we approved this process that is saying these are the investments, this was the tolerance. It's like a little box that we're going to have on every slide that sort of reminds what those prior decisions and then where those stage gates and outs are. We agreed that we were going to watch this for 3 years and come back. Okay, now we're at 18 months in, now we're at 24 months in, and creating that consistency for them so that the new board members are saying, oh, okay, I understand that this isn't a forever. There was a step that I can then wait for. I don't have to jump in and panic just yet if I have concerns.
I love the intentionality there of not just the orienting them, but the reinforcing by what you want to put in front of them to remind them of what those stage gates were, right? Of all those pieces that reminds them each time they're together about where we are in process. I I have one that is not necessarily about this process, but is more about your relationship with the board, which is how do you help a board trust you to take them from being very hands-on, perhaps due to previous lack of leadership, to being more strategic? What has been your way of nurturing that, right? That this our attendee who is submitted is starting to see some pushback in the member to member, staff to staff model because they have a history of being so involved. Any thoughts or advice for how to get your board to this more strategic place?
It's interesting. So when I came in, it was mid-COVID, right? So I did have a board that was meeting every month. They were highly operational. I had been a leadership transition before I came in, so they were very tactical coming in. What I have found is that it actually comes to that understanding the motivations thing. What
Yeah.
is it that why were they in the tactics? And once I understood why were they in the tactics, it's actually a lot easier then to help them get to a different place. if they were in some cases, they were in the tactics because that's where they're comfortable.
Mm,
And that meant I needed to help talk with them and spend time with them about the role of a board and what did that mean? How can I help you get to a place where we're talking about strategy? The second is understanding if that was a reaction to distrust. There was some unease on the board, so they're wanting to get into that. And so, okay, what do you need to be comfortable here? And so again, it's this intention, understanding that there's a mismatch there, and then doing that. Then I'll tell you the last one that was surprising to me, but was really meaningful to the staff around me, that they were noticing that it was the moment for them and for the board.
mm.
And it was being transparent about what didn't go right. I did pretty quick into my time. I did one of these, here's what we said we were going to do, results expected. How did we do against it? And I put a big old red X on one of them.
Yeah.
And the staff had immediately had a reaction like, oh my goodness, are you sure? Like that doesn't feel right. But in fact, on the other side of that, the level of trust that just saying we didn't get this one right created was so high that they were then a lot more willing to let go of the tactical because they trusted that I was upfront about it and move into that more strategic space. I'm pretty intentional about using language around like our role as staff in setting the table for decisioning, doing the hard work of putting out all of the pros and the cons and the risks that's our job, and then they can stay up here without having to get down there.
So let's talk about the staff for a moment. I'm sure, uh, like many organizations, staff have many roles, despite a singular title, with much that they're doing at the organization. How did you bring the staff along in this process, right? Like this idea of we're going to take big swings, right? And you know, I can imagine staff hearing, where are we going to have room for that on our portfolio, right? The How did you bring staff along in this process? Let's talk about their role for a little
And you're exactly right. And honestly, it's the exact same steps.
bit.
It's the exact same steps. It's just not secret sauce, right? What are the concerns? What were they worried about? Oh, okay. Well, team is worried about this is just a bunch of work that's going to get dumped on top of me, on top of everything else I do. Very real, very practical. And I absolutely understand where that comes from. I think every one of us who's worked in associations has had that experience of, oh, that's a great idea. Now I have to do that and find all the time to do it. And so I would say in this case, that was the primary, the biggest worry on the part of staff was who's doing this? I don't understand it. And so when I talked about the structure of the project, many of those structures were in response to that. So hiring a person who that was their only job. This wasn't very clear. The rules of engagement meant it wasn't going to end up on the plates of existing staff. There was that, and then there was just a lot of conversation. I had to take the same intentionality with the staff in helping them understand what problem were we trying to solve, why were we using this tool to try and solve it, and what were the risks of not doing it. So yeah, I don't know that the steps were different, just the venues.
Feels like an underlying theme to all of this is trust, right? It's really about building relationships and trust to be able to take these kinds of swings through these different audiences. I One of the ways you just answered, I think, was by demonstrating to the board that you're not going to hold from them the truth if something doesn't go well, right? Allowing the space for things to play out. We got a question that goes to sort of the culture between staff and board, because as you're asking the board to function at a strategic level, the staff there, if you had seen or you do see your organization's leadership starting to head towards its member leaders starting to focus more on those granular problems or trying to jump into the weeds out of concern, Any suggestions for one of our colleagues that asked the question around rebuilding trust in staff as association professionals, right? Like if that's starting to slip in the wrong direction, how do you help the board get back to where they're supposed to be?
So I guess I personally use two techniques for this. And the first is to frequently and loudly um, talk about not um, to insert into conversations the roles,
Yeah,
right? So I said, it is the staff's role to enable your decision making. You want the expertise of the marketing team, right? You all are endocrinologists and scientists, and the member. We need to bring this. I use language like that a lot, and it helps reset folks when they're starting, because I mean, practically, I am sure most of us have the experience that our members believe themselves to be experts in membership or in meetings because they attend meetings or are members, right? And the frustration of the expertise, the staff feeling like their expertise is being questioned, not feeling like they are having their expertise. I don't want to like dismiss it. It's true.
right.
And so frequently talking about what are the roles in the room.
Mm.
Again, it's not a lecture that I'm giving to them. I'm inserting it into the conversation frequently. And then the second, I had a second one, but now it's escaping me. Oh, it's the recap. It's because the way this shows up, this distrust is often in creating direction or telling solutioning,
Yeah.
is the way that it, like, ignoring the advice and solutioning. And I think that that is the place where this recap and reaffirm thing tool comes in so powerfully. What I heard you saying, Lowell, is that you're concerned about you're concerned about the risks, concerned about having a voice. Is that right? Is that what I'm hearing? Okay, brilliant. Well, let the team go off and come up with some recommendations to solve for that. And then the member leader is feeling heard, their concerns are heard, and then we're allowing the staff to do what they're paid to do, which is to then solution.
I was with a group yesterday finishing up a strategy engagement where uh, they went through the whole process of prioritizing critical pieces. And the chair kept bringing up, well, what about workforce? And reflective questioning, it didn't come out in your priorities, didn't come out what you want to do. And finally it came out. He's like, I'm sick of having people ask me about this. It's a small number. Can we just make a decision about it? Uh, and it was not by running to do something about it, but just creating the space of what's the actual issue, right? That it came out. Uh,
Love it.
so I love that
Yeah.
creating space. We've talked about sort of the staff role as well as the board role. Uh, what role did the membership as a whole play? Like, do they know you're taking these big swings, right? Like, what is the place of they've entrusted the leadership to make the resource investment decisions for the organization. So you're not going to do, I imagine, these large, uh, interesting and exciting risk swings by consensus of an entire membership body. Uh, but also to their organization, right? And so how do you navigate that community awareness or involvement?
And so that it is different in different cultures and different organizations that I've worked in. In the org that I'm in now, I have the privilege of having a membership that is largely very trusting of the leaders of the society, and so it is more that we included in newsletters and things where we talk about what's happening, but at a very high level without a lot of specificity. And so I am very grateful that in this organization that trust exists. I have worked in others where that trust was not, that didn't exist as much. And so that took its own level of communications planning, right? It had its own communication plan around the membership. That we had to be very thoughtful and deep, and using different audiences and different messages. And so really it was, in this particular case with the IDF, we didn't have to, but I have had to do that in the past. And that the internal staff communications plan, the external member communications plan, right? All of that has to be thought through and executed against.
Can we talk for a moment around the concept of stage gates, right? Because those are promises of progress that clearly, when you're making these kinds of bigger swings, has that as a concept or a framework actually infused any other part of the organization? Like, do you use that concept of stage gates when it comes to your strategic plan or to any other places as a trust building and accountability mechanism?
Yes. So for us, it's primarily at the moment, it's primarily been built into new programs, pilots. We're very much embracing the model of like minimum viable product, right? Like get something out there. It's not perfect. Let's understand, iterate, move, right? And so we're not trying to create giant programs. So built within it is stage gates. So if we are launching a series of conferences, right? It is okay. We're going to do a minimum of 3, not never just do one, right?
Right.
You're never going to get
Well,
enough out
one
of
doesn't
one.
tell
You'll
you
never,
anything, right?
right?
Could go great and the rest fail or
Yeah.
terribly succeed.
So, we're going to do the first 3 in this amount of time. We expect this to be the case. We'll check in with you here, and if we meet this, then we'll move on to stage 2, which, and we may give a sense of what stage 2 looks like while understanding we'd need to make a lot of changes. And so that sort of innovation model is where we're really pulling that stage gate concept from and then infusing it through. What's the perfect world? Every single program, product, or service would have a set of clear criteria that says this is a go, no go. If we fall below this attendance, we stop the program, right? Practically, that isn't the way that any of us are operating. I mean, I hope there's some out there, but I haven't worked for any of them yet, where it's super pervasive in a good, healthy way. I think we can also go down. I've been in orgs where the evaluation process becomes unhealthy. But in a perfect world, sort of where we're headed is this upfront clarity of this is so I don't have to kill sacred cows, right? Like the
Right.
cows just take themselves out of the ring. That's the vision.
Yeah. I love that. I know our time's starting to run short, just one or two more. Uh, and this isn't on the spot one, so if you don't, it's okay. But clearly, when you were saying what has allowed you to be the leader that allows this organization, the Entrance Society, to invest in this way, was really you referred to sort of a strong pathway of mentorship, right? Like being able to be in the space and being allowed to ask a gajillion questions. And so I wish everyone has a mentor as such. As you've entered into this particular effort, right, around creating the Strategic Innovation Fund, being willing to, solicit all of those potential places, the 25 proposals you got, and what are we going to swing at? Will it work? Have you found any specific places of learning or resource or books or podcast? Like, if someone was interested in steeping themselves to prepare for this kind of opportunity more to lead an organization, but didn't have the benefit of necessarily just having the series of mentors that gave them the space that you did, have you happened to find anything in your journey that you would recommend?
This kind of engagement, right? For me, there's a ton. I mean, there is opportunities to that you have to go looking for, but that we can learn from each other. We can even if you can't have a formal mentoring. I really appreciate the perspectives that this kind of person brings, and there's a lot out there where one can go learn for free, and sometimes not, right? Like the ASAE conferences and things where you're hearing different perspectives. What I found most valuable is to bring myself out of my comfort zone, right?
Yeah.
And put myself in a space where I don't know everybody in the room and I have no idea what the topic is and what is this? But how people think about it. And then for me, it was that intentionality of sort of not just what was the idea, but how did they get the how, right? And thinking through, and then to your point, asking the questions as one can about how did that get done, not just what did you do. So,
All right, I'm going to sneak in a bonus question that
thank
we
you.
got that Anne just gave us. The sunsetting of programs has been a challenge for us. She would love to hear more from anyone else on the KPIs you bring your board and helping to make the decisions, right? Especially for those things that they've held tried and true that there's a great love for, but perhaps are not bringing the same return as they once did. The duty of care, how do you help them sunset? Any thoughts on that?
The best, this is one of those, it's, you need the right mix of people and environment. Like there is some timing stuff that happens here, but I think it's very hard if you're just trying to tackle it one individual programs,
Right.
that it, because that's the sacred cows, and that makes it really, really hard, as opposed to backing up and thinking about principles. I'll say the other thing that was super valuable in my toolbox was having a what would you use the money, time, or resources to do, as opposed to it being something vague and ephemeral. We need to save money, we need to cut costs. I have used in the endocrine society, one of the things that we do is write medical guidelines, to guide care, care from physicians. And this is a really expensive, really big process, and you cannot get funding for it. It is coming out of member dues, right? Like primarily. And so that we can't do as many as the world needs. And so it was incredible. The first time I heard my board debating, should we do this one or this one, this one or that one, that was the perfect tool to then use every other time we were trying to free up funds. I heard you all debating, how could we? So giving a very concrete, wouldn't you rather spend money impacting 1,000 members,
Yeah.
for, doing XYZ, as opposed to this 25-person, event that is the sacred cow that's $150,000 for 20 people, right? How do we could do more of this. So for me, that was a really valuable tool,
Yeah.
in helping that, and then thinking broadly, not about a single cow.
I once again, your strength as a questioner and listener shining through and hearing what is the thing they really want to be able to use it for application later. So time's coming to a close. So I'll ask this as a closing question. If you met a much younger you now that was on a trajectory to someday being an executive that would be able to help boards like this, what's the piece of advice you would give them in terms of establishing a stronger career in the association space where organizations need the kind of structures you're creating? For someone that's coming up as an executive, what advice would you give them about what to learn, what to look for, what to do?
Be It's actually that first question that I asked, which was, be less afraid of a no.
Mm,
A no can actually be a very powerful trust building tool as well. And that transformation isn't going to happen if you don't ask the question in the first place. And that's true internal to the office and external. And I think I was afraid for way too long, to really ask and press these kinds of questions, because I was sure that the answer was no.
well, I will thank you for saying yes to being with us today. Certainly, not just your presentation, but the conversation afterwards demonstrates not just the effort that you've made, but how you've constructed a culture and a process of partnership with your board and staff that allows Entricon Society to really think about these places of possibility that I know everyone that's been listening in, have been watching, has been benefiting from. So thank you.
Thank you for having me.
And for everyone who's been listening in or watches us in the recap, we hope that this, as every conversation we have, is insightful and impactful as we work together to build the association industry of tomorrow. We'll look forward to seeing you next time. And until then, Association Rock On.